Welcome to Diaspora, the show where we share the remarkable stories of immigrants from the Indian subcontinent. I'm your host, Aditya Mehta, and each week we sit down with individuals who have made the journey over and explore their experiences, their challenges, their triumphs. We delve into their unique perspectives of settling into a new country while staying connected to their roots. Today we are joined by Sanjeev Joshipura. He's the executive director of Indiaspora, born and raised in Bombay with some time in West Germany before moving to Toronto for his MBA. He's been in the US since 2002 with a mix of corporate and non-profit experience. He's taken Indiaspora from a single staffing non-profit to an international organization with over 20 employees. So a lot of interesting stuff here to talk about. And with that, let's dive into today's conversation. And Sanjeev, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me. Delighted to be here.
So since you're from Bombay, my first question for you, is it Mumbai or is it Bombay?
That's a good question, Aditya. I tend to call it Bombay because that's what I've grown up calling it.
Yeah.
And, I can go either way and I do go either way on various occasions. My instinct is Bombay, but Bombay, Mumbai, it really doesn't matter.
Are you fluent in Marathi at all?
मी आता सगळा मराठी विसरलो. मला
Yeah.
येत होता, मी पुण्यात राहिलो 5 वर्षासाठी सगळा
Yeah.
विसरलो.
Yeah, so when I speak Marathi, I tend to say Mumbai. But if I'm
Okay.
talking in any other languages, I had also lost touch with my Marathi, but we have a neighbor who recently moved away. They are what I call my photo negative. They are Marathis from Gujarat. So they also speak Marathi and Gujarati, although his Gujarati is very strong, like Baroda accent, and I have this broken Bombay Gujarati that we all speak. But because of that, my Marathi has slowly started coming back into touch.
Lovely.
So
Multilingual.
yeah, of course. My son, we've taught him Gujarati right from the start. Till he was 2, we never spoke English with him because he's going to learn that in school anyways.
Sure.
But now he can contextually understand a bit of Marathi and Hindi as well. And now we're working on Spanish. So
Oh, lovely.
language skills can always go a long way. You have a unique last name. What's the origin of your last name?
That's again a great question, Aditya. So I'll give you 2 answers. I think the factual answer, is that I'm not 100% sure. I don't know for a
Yeah.
fact. However,
Yeah.
there is a theory that I have heard over time from elders and so on and so forth, that there used to be a place on the map in Gujarat called Joshipura.
Okay.
And, that means, town, village, place of being. And apparently, several generations earlier, apparently we used to be, our family used to be, zamindars or landlords or whatever it is. And from
Yeah.
there, the name got changed to what it is now.
Interesting. You're the only family with that last name that I know. So obviously
It's an
Joshi
uncommon, it's
Yeah.
an uncommon last name, but I do know other people who are not very closely related who have that family name.
Interesting. You noted that you spent some time in West Germany, and you're kind of giving away your age by calling it West Germany. But tell us more about that, how that came about.
So this was from 1981 to 1983. I was 5 years old when I went and 7 when I returned to India. And we lived in a town, my parents and I, and my paternal grandparents. We lived, my brother, who is much younger, was not born at the time. We lived in a town called Erlangen, which is in Germany today, but West Germany at the time. The Berlin Wall was still up. And the reason that happened is because my father has worked in only one company his entire working life, and that is
Yeah.
Siemens. And
Yeah.
that is a German company, as you might know.
Yeah.
And he was transferred from Bombay then to Erlangen.
And it's interesting that your grandparents also moved with him, because that's not usually common when you go for a work assignment, right?
No, that's not, you're right. That's not very common. But, my dad happens to be the lone child, which is relatively uncommon in that generation of
Yeah.
my paternal
Oh, yeah.
grandparents.
Yeah.
And, wanted to be together, wanted them to experience Germany. And we were all very happy that they could join us.
That's awesome. Yeah, back then, my grandfather has 8 siblings, and the large families were pretty common. And this is a theme we've touched upon here on our show as well for our listeners who are local Americans, that it's common for multi-generational households to live together. And if you're 40 and you're living with your parents, that's not a sign of like a bad sign. In India, that's actually a great sign that you're all a united family and living together.
Correct.
You also noted that you went to Canada for your MBA. If I remember correctly, back then Canada was not the destination that was as popular as it is today. So what made you choose Canada? Was that a conscious choice to choose Canada, or was it more the university that happened to be in Canada?
So it was a mix of both, is the honest truth. I did apply to several schools in America and in Canada. And, I didn't get into many of them, got into a few of them. The ones I got into were in Canada. And as it turned out, there were two advantages that ended up occurring of my eventually going to Canada. One is that, of course, the Canadian dollar was cheaper
Yeah.
vis-a-vis the Indian rupee as compared to the US dollar.
Yeah.
But the other is that the University of Toronto, where I did my MBA, and Toronto, by the way, I'm sure you know this, you've lived in Canada yourself,
Yeah.
Aditya. Toronto and Canada is a very multicultural country, welcoming city, cosmopolitan. So I really enjoyed that part of Toronto, but also specifically the University of Toronto and the Rotman School of Management, where I did my
Yeah.
MBA, was really up and coming and rising up the rankings. And today it's a school to be reckoned with on the global stage. So,
Yep.
sort of in the aftermath, some of that glow rubs off on its alumni, I guess.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, I would say Toronto is as multicultural as New York is. I would dare say it's maybe even more multicultural because it's easier for more countries, nationals to come into Canada than it is for the US now. When people ask me what are the most multicultural cities in your opinion, for me it's Toronto, London, Dubai, and New York, and not, just New York, which is what people in this part of the world think.
Right.
I found the Canadian universities really good, and I have a lot of friends who have gone to Toronto to study, and it's just it's like it's a very similar experience to living in the US. If you're in a smaller town like Winnipeg or something, then sure it's a different experience. But Vancouver feels like a younger brother of Seattle, right?
Yes.
I always say Vancouver is Seattle's Pune because
Yes,
it's
I think that's a reasonable comparison.
yeah. When you came to study, was that your first trip to the North America, or had you been here before?
No, I had been before. You see, when I lived in West Germany in 1982, as a 6-year-old child, I had come to the United States because my maternal auntie, my Masi, as they say in Gujarati, lived at the time and still lives in America.
Mm-hmm.
And we came to visit her, and she and her husband, my uncle, they helped us tour up and down and took us up and down the eastern seaboard of America. So really enjoyed that experience as well as a 6-year-old, but I don't really remember it, I have to say.
Yeah, US was a different country back then. It was a different country even in the early 2000s when I came here to study.
Yeah. Ronald Reagan was president back then. So old times, very different times. A lot has changed in the US.
Yes, of course. What were your first impressions as a student, like early days? Were there any cultural shocks or any lighthearted instances?
Several light-hearted instances, but yes, cultural shocks as well. And I found it difficult at the time to sort of go through those cultural shocks, but hopefully over time it has helped me and so many other immigrants, including people like yourself, obviously, grow over time and adapt to conditions and environments. One of the things that is very different as well in North America as compared to India is the concept of personal space, the concept of privacy.
Yeah.
Is very, very different. The concept of how you get involved in conversations, the topics that you converse on,
Yeah.
they're bound to be very different, right? So, it takes time to get used to it, to get adjusted. It takes a little bit of heartache, I guess, as well. But, over time, you learn. You live and learn and you grow.
Yeah, it's a hallmark of high context cultures like India that you live in a communal setting and you don't have much of your individual space or sometimes even identity. It's more of a family identity. I routinely faced that when I was working with my family business. My problem was that after UT, I went back to India. So I got used to and started loving my personal space and then went back to India. And then everyone was like, why are you behaving this way? Because it's very odd for someone who's low context to be in a place like India, because then you have lower uncertainty avoidance, you have lower power distance, all those things that come with a low context culture. I do think it's harder to go from low to high than it is to do the other way around because there's more context you're trying to pick up from the air and there are more unknown unknowns. Whereas from high to low context, whatever someone says, that's what they said. Like there's no hidden meaning, there's no angles to it. I think I'm going to put a link in the show notes.
Interesting point.
Yeah, we'll put a link in the show notes so that our listeners can learn more about that. How did you find the rigor of the MBA? Because Indian education system is very different. They focus on very different things, and it can be very rigorous and taxing. So was that a breeze for you? Was it a different set of challenges or something else?
It was not at all a breeze. As you know, I mean, you've done business education yourself, Aditya. Business schools have some hard disciplines, as they call them, and some soft disciplines.
Yeah.
The soft disciplines came a bit easier to me. The marketing, the HR, the leadership courses, all of that kind of stuff. What some people perhaps pejoratively call the fluff stuff of MBA.
Yeah.
But the hard courses, which are also extremely interesting and vitally important, obviously, the accounting, the finance, the statistics, all of that stuff, I found that pretty hard. And I struggled with that, but eventually, I even recall failing one particular exam. I'm trying to recall whether it was financial accounting or it might have been microeconomics, actually, although I love economics, by the way.
Yeah.
But on that particular day, I just blanked and couldn't answer the exam paper. So I think it might have been microeconomics. I remember failing the subject and having to repeat it over the summer. And, so it involved some struggles.
Yeah, in India, failing was like, end of the world kind of thing.
Wow.
I failed one course in undergrad, and it's because it was an open book exam, so I didn't study and I forgot the textbook at home. And I was like, look, I'll go get it. I'll get less time to pass the exam. That's fine. And he's like, no, once you enter, you cannot leave the test room. And I think he was just being difficult. But anyways, I don't think my parents know about it even now. Was it? Yeah, one of the things about this podcast is I've never asked anyone, including my wife, if they've heard any particular episode, because I don't want to put anyone on the spot. And, because life happens, people, even people who are close to you and their fans and whatever might not get time to listen to each episode.
I know your wife was on a previous episode, wasn't she?
Yeah, she was on episode 33 and we connected quite a lot because you don't talk to your spouse in a structured format, sitting down face to face like that, right? You're used to like the constant communication that goes on as a couple. And the other thing was you don't sit and actively reflect upon your journey. And
Right.
We've been here 8 years. We've never sat and like reviewed it that, oh, look how far we have come. So that was quite an interesting episode. And it was a very good and very genuine conversation that we had.
Lovely.
Yeah. I told her before the episode, like, don't cut me off like you cut me off in real life. And thankfully she did not. Within the MBA program, was there an active recruitment kind of college placement support? And is that what you did to get your first job after college?
So there most certainly was college placement support, a recruitment program. University of Toronto and Rotman were even back then well-regarded names, at least within Canada. But no, I did not really avail of that because I wanted to, by 2002, when I finished my MBA, I knew that I wanted to move to the United States because my wife lived in the United States already. She was in Chicago at the time. And, we wanted to, actually, it's an interesting story. We had initially applied for Canadian permanent residency for both my wife and me.
Yeah.
That fell through because of some paperwork problems. It didn't come about. And so then my wife got a job in the United States after her master's degree in Chicago. And the plan was always for me to move to the US. Now, at that time, there were two problems, very significant problems. One was that, the University of Toronto was not very well heralded in the United States. It's more so today, but not back then.
Yeah.
And the second issue was a practical matter that people face even more so today, perhaps, which is the visa issue. So, because of these reasons, when I did move to the US, I struggled mightily to land positions.
Yeah. Yeah, that visa issues are a recurring theme. Here in Seattle, we have a lot of tech background Indians, very, very heavily tech. And I'm seeing a significant number of Indians moving back to India because they are kind of fed up of waiting for this green card to come through. Opportunities in India are growing. You have all the help and you have family close by. And if you have young kids, then their grandparents are right there. And, life's not bad for $120,000 compared to what it might be here for $300,000. And that's something that I would like your opinion on later in the show as well, as to where are these visa challenges headed as well. So then you moved to Chicago after your degree. And what was your first job out of college?
So actually, when I moved to Chicago, funny things, the one thing that is quite routine and not funny is that I again pursued education, as many people do when they're in visa problems.
Yep.
And I actually wanted to study financial risk management, which I did at the Illinois Institute of Technology. I got a graduate certification in that particular area. So enjoyed that program. But, funny things were that a lot of very disparate but interesting things ended up happening. I went through several interviews with, let's say, insurance agents and things like that, things like car dealerships and things like that, where the conversation was, oh, you know what? We know you're an immigrant who is not, currently really, you don't have all of your papers and all of that. That's fine. We'll set all the records straight later after you get all your papers. We know it's all in process. For now, just work for us, volunteer for us, and then we will pay you later. But, those kinds of conversations, I always felt a little iffy about them for a multitude of different reasons.
Yeah.
And so didn't quite continue that. But the other thing was that I always had, even when I was living in India, I always had an interest in international affairs, global macroeconomics, geopolitics, public policy, things like that. And I was getting very interested, especially after 9/11 here in America, catching the American political bug, if you will, and public policy bug. And so I started working for a US Senate political election campaign in Illinois, which was a wonderful experience. We lost the race. I was the deputy campaign manager, but it was an absolutely wonderful learning experience.
And what was the name of the senator candidate?
The candidate was a gentleman named Chiranjeev Kathuria, an Indian origin gentleman, and he was running for United States Senate from Illinois. And that race was eventually won by none other than a gentleman named Barack Obama.
Right. Amazing. All right. So I want to ask you a lot of questions about that whole space, but it's time for our first break. So stay tuned and we'll be right back after these messages.
Talking about guns with others might not always feel comfortable, but it could save a life. Here's a way to start a conversation. Your family is going over to your neighbor's home for dinner for the first time. How would you ask if there are any unlocked guns in the home?
Hey,
we're so excited for tonight. Before we come over, though, may I ask if there are any unlocked guns in your home?
our guns are stored securely, locked in a safe that the kids can't access.
Awesome.
Learn how to have the conversation at agreetoagree.org. Brought to you by the Ad Council.
Hello, I'm Chris Erdman. Every Wednesday at 8 a.m. on KKNW, I sit down with inspiring entrepreneurs, creative minds, and game changers to uncover the real stories behind their business. On my show, Made of More, we explore the challenges that they've overcome, the breakthroughs that they've celebrated, and the mindset that drives them forward. If you're ready to unlock your full entrepreneurial potential, Made of More is the show for you, because here we know you are made of more. Every Wednesday at 8 a.m. on KKNW.
Ready to shake things up? Try Alternative Talk 1150.
Welcome back to Diaspora on KKNW, where we share interesting stories of first-generation immigrants from the Indian subcontinent. We're talking to Sanjeev Joshipura, Senior Executive in the nonprofit space. Before we get back to talking to Sanjeev, I want to take a moment to remind you to subscribe to our channel on YouTube. You can find all our videos in video format there. So Sanjeev, we talked about the political bug biting you. What was your path from that first campaign that you were part of to when you started at Indiaspora?
Well, I started at Indiaspora approximately 9.5 years ago in June of 2016. And that political campaign was in 2003, 2004. So, a few years intervening, but it was not a linear path by any means. It was a path that incorporated, like I mentioned before, public policy, international affairs, politics, economics, global macroeconomics, all of that stuff.
Yeah.
But then also at different times incorporated, the corporate world based on my business education and my interest in that space. So, I did a lot of different things. I have worked in different multinational organizations in different industries in India and in the United States, typically in strategy and finance capacities. But in addition to that, on the public policy political side, I have been a visiting lecturer at the US State Department, training American diplomats who are going to South and Central Asia, including to India, of course. I have been the president of a financial services industry association, a trade group, which is based in Washington, D.C., but with large financial sector member companies all over the world. I have been a staff member on Capitol Hill, advising senators, congressmen, congresswomen on, US budget, economics, foreign affairs, that kind of thing. I've run my own US-India consulting company with a business partner out of Delhi, and I was in Washington, of course. So I've done different things, and obviously the US Senate campaign that you just mentioned. And all of that, kind of put together, in a matter of serendipity, as often happens, ended up helping me to get into Indiaspora and then at Indiaspora.
Yeah, that's great. That's a very nice variety of things. And I correct me if I'm wrong, not too many people from South Asia are in those fields. Like, if you're in tech, you'll see a lot of Indians, but the space that you were operating in, were there too many Indian people there?
Now, Aditya, the number of South Asian and Indian people specifically in this kind of space is increasing. It's still obviously much, much less than, let's say, doctors or software engineers or, that kind of space. But it is increasing. But back then, when I started, there were very, very few indeed. Yes, that is correct.
Yeah. And what got you interested in particular about Indiaspora? Was it just a natural continuation of all these interests that you mentioned, or was there something else that attracted you to it?
Again, as it often happens in life, the answer is a bit nuanced. It's a combination of sort of all of the above. Definitely, it was and is an area of my passion and interest, and an area that I wanted to and sought to work in. But it's also a lot of serendipity. I mean, people I knew ended up knowing the founder of Indiaspora, and the board of directors at the time was deciding to professionalize the organization and recruit, professional staff. And we got connected. Also, the fact that my wife and I in 2016, we had twins. And as I mentioned to you, one of the things that I was doing is I was running my own consulting business along with a business partner in New Delhi on the US-India space, both public policy issues and business issues. And, as it often happens in a consulting environment, when you're running your own business, sort of monthly revenues are up and down,
of course,
depending on clientele and all of that kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
And my wife and I felt that given that we now had twins at the time, it might be a better idea to have sort of more regular employment, if you will.
Yeah.
So a combination of a lot of things put together led to me joining Indiaspora. And, can't complain. I mean, I've had the time of my life, fortunately, over the past 9.5 years with an incredible bunch of people.
So one question about being married and having a business. Was your wife having full-time employment before you had the twins?
Yes. So my wife has had a 25-year career. She also has she has a bachelor's degree in India in computer engineering, but then she has 3 master's degrees in America.
Wow.
Okay. But then in addition to that, she also has had a 25-year career in software development, in management consulting, in the nonprofit space herself. So yes, she was working at the time, but we felt that it would be helpful if I also had a steady income stream.
Yeah, my wife was always the corporate employee. I was always the entrepreneur. And then when we had our son, who's now almost 6, we swapped roles to ensure that at least there's stable income from one person. But now we're both in a space for most of this 2025 where both of us are doing business. So the way we mitigated that risk is that my business, by the nature of the business, has a repeating income because it's a subscription-based business. But otherwise, I don't think we would have been able to do riskier businesses at the same time.
Mm-hmm.
So tell me more about what all different things Diaspora does.
Sure. So we are a non-profit organization. We were founded in 2012 and I joined them in 2016. Our mission is to inspire and position the global Indian diaspora to be a force for good and to build bridges among diaspora leaders across countries and professions with leaders resident in India. Our vision is to be the Davos of the global Indian, in a colloquial manner of speaking. Yeah. And we are a collection of leaders of the Indian diaspora and leaders resident in India across a variety of different fields: business, finance, entrepreneurship, consulting, then the arts, academics, sciences, sports, journalism and media, literature, the arts, the nonprofit sector, entrepreneurs. So a vast variety of different fields, technology, a vast variety of different fields, a group of leaders who gets together to focus on a few specific areas. And the types of areas we work on are philanthropy and social impact, entrepreneurship and innovation, then working with the next gen of the diaspora for connecting them not only with each other, but also connecting them with India.
Yeah.
Then working on some thought leadership and original content production in a variety of different fields. And we can get into some details later. And also, importantly, I think it's worth emphasizing that we do our work around the world in various different countries.
Yeah.
We are not just a US-based entity. The US is a very strong area, our strongest area.
Yeah.
But we have 7 core countries that we work in, which is US, Canada, UK, UAE, India itself, Singapore, and Australia. And then in addition to that, these are our 7 core markets, if you will, although it's, nonprofits don't talk in terms of markets. I'm just using a colloquial term. And then in addition to that, we are slowly and gradually building relationships with the top Indian diaspora and non-Indians as well in about, I'd say, 35 countries beyond that.
That's amazing. You mentioned the comparison with Davos. So is there a large conference or conclave that happens every year? And if so, is it always in one place or does it rotate locations?
There is indeed a large global event that we do. So we, in 2026, in March, we are doing our global forum, our Indiaspora forum, and our AI summit. Both of these events, we are doing them in Bangalore, in India.
Okay.
But just earlier this year in 2025, we did both of these events, the AI summit and the Indiaspora Global Forum in Abu Dhabi and Dubai in the UAE. And we plan to rotate them around from place to place. So we're already exploring 2027 venues, potentially either in Singapore or in England. In 2028, we don't know yet, but we'll bring it back to India and we might explore perhaps Jaipur, for example. So we'll keep rotating and alternating between inside India and outside India.
Yeah. Apart from this one kind of flagship event, what are the other types of activities that you do to bring this vision into reality?
So we do a lot of different kinds of events. This is obviously our flagship, like you said, but then we have a big United States forum that we do for our US-based members. The US is, like I was saying before, the largest source of our network.
Yeah.
So we do a US-based forum as well. And then in addition to that, we do several smaller events. We do a philanthropy summit every year. Then we do an academic summit once every couple of years. We do several climate-related events every year. Also, we work with different leaders in a variety of fields, whether it's politics, sports, business, technology, the arts, etc., academics, wide variety, philanthropy, to do very, very curated events. All our events are quite curated, really, even the larger ones. But these small curated events that I'm referring to, which we do around the world, they could be as small as 15 or 20 people sometimes.
Right. I've seen some of these like Indo-American chambers of commerce. The feeling I get is your work is much, much broader than that. And you have that maybe just one aspect of all the different things you do to engage with the diaspora and the local population, right?
And that's by design, Aditya, that we are a broader sort of entity. It's kind of an umbrella organization, if you will, in a sense. I like to explain Indiaspora a little bit by saying that if you were to come to an Indiaspora event, a typical Indiaspora event, our annual forum or some such, and if you were seated at a dinner table, then you will find that, the person next to you, one of them could be a sports person, next to a business person, next to an artist, next to a scientist, next to a politician, next to a journalist, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
And it's by design that we are very eclectic, but we do ensure that we work with the leaders among those various fields of Indian origin around the world, including in India itself.
Yeah. One of the objectives of my podcast and show is to kind of explain to the Indian population that Indians can do all sorts of things and the Indians do all sorts of things, especially in Seattle because it is so tech heavy. It's common for you to meet another Indian person and the question is, which software team do you work for? And not, what do you do? Right. And then I play, guess what Aditya does? And I've never yet lost that game. So I'm really happy to hear that, you're able to bring together people of our community from all these different walks of life. If someone wants to get involved, how does one get involved and what are the different ways in which one can get involved?
So we are an organization where we focus on, through our work that we do, whether it's our original content production, whether it's our thought leadership, whether it's our philanthropic convenings, the kind of work that we focus on is meant to benefit society at large. And we mean society, not just in India. Obviously, we are very keen on working with India, helping India, learning from India. We are very keen on that.
Yeah.
But we are also very keen on helping society where we live, in the countries
Sure.
we currently reside in.
Yeah.
So our work is broadly focused in that sense. But the people that end up attending typically or being involved in Diaspora are usually almost always invitation only. So we have a group of donors, what we call members at Indiaspora. There are about 400 individuals like that around the world currently. And they are invitation only. We invite or we select our donors based on their accomplishments, their background, their resonance with what we do, because we don't want to be a transactional entity. We want people to support the cause.
Yeah.
And then we have a second set of stakeholders that's also very important to us that don't donate money to us. We call them prominent friends. Our donors tend to be people of affluence, typically in the business space.
Yeah.
Our prominent friends tend to be real champions and leaders, but in less remunerative professions.
Sure.
And therefore outside the business space.
Very cool. I'm going to tap your website for future guests for my show, because it seems like a lot of these people would have stories which are very good fits with what we're trying to do over here.
www.indiaspora.org. You've given me a chance to make a plug for it.
Absolutely. And we will include your website and social media handles on our show notes as well for those who want to visit.
Yeah.
How has the perception of the Indian diaspora changed? And this is a question specifically for the US/Canada over the 20-something years that you have been living here.
It's changed quite dramatically. I've been here 25 years now. There was a time when I came here when Indians, first of all, there were less than half the number, I think probably about 40% or less of the Indian diaspora back then in the United States as there are now.
Yeah.
So that itself was a big difference. But secondly, when I came here, the Indian diaspora, some of them were known as, known in the medical space. Some of them were known in the technology space even, or getting to be known. Some of them were known in the educational space as professors and so forth.
Yeah.
But really, the Indian diaspora was not that much spoken of.
Yeah.
But then came, Y2K and the technology boom and so forth. And there was an influx of Indian diaspora. And then Indians started ascending to leadership positions in various organizations slowly over time.
Yeah.
You have the Indras, you have the Satyas, and various others. And, the Indian diaspora came to be heralded not only for the business leadership, but then also slowly and gradually in other fields in the political realm as well, on both sides of the aisle. And, tremendous numbers of Indians in leadership positions. When I say Indians, I use that word loosely. I mean people of Indian origin. They might be American citizens. People in academics as deans and provosts and chancellors, that kind of thing, right?
Yeah.
So they, I think, for a significant amount of time, came to be admired and heralded for that. But now, I think we are in the third phase since the year 2000, since I came here. And that phase is one of being at the receiving end of increased vitriol. Sometimes often online, but unfortunately, occasionally in person, including, being victims of murder. And, it is incumbent, I think, on not just in diaspora, but I would say largely on the Indian diaspora, generally speaking, to do a couple of things. Number one, to ensure that the narrative is told and conveyed and communicated, that the Indian diaspora is not here to steal jobs or make life worse for people in America, but rather that we contribute in so many different ways. We are 1.5% of the American population. We pay 6% of the taxes, just as one example, right? Wow. That's one. And then secondly, to ensure that we also focus not just on helping India. We all want to help India. We all have, many of us, not all.
Yeah.
More than 50% of the Indian diaspora here has been born in India. We have a natural affinity towards helping India, and that must continue, or working with India and learning from India now increasingly. But we also need to ensure that we focus on helping and giving and participating in civic life and society here where we live. That also is very important.
Sure. I totally agree with you. When I always had the perception that Indians, by and large, have a positive impression in the US. Of course, the times after 9/11 were very difficult, where I think all the different brown people got banded together. But I think now increasingly people do realize the difference between all the different countries in South Asia and the Middle East. And, just because you're from that region doesn't, automatically the stereotypes may not apply. Great. I really enjoyed that input of yours. Okay, let's take a short break now. And when we come back, I want to talk more about how the Indian government engages with the diaspora around the world and how that has been changing. So stay tuned and we'll be right back after these messages.
Imagine home. The smell of coffee, the sound of a lawnmower, the sun's warmth on your face. Free to be yourself, surrounded by love that helps you grow. This is a place to call home. That's an American dream we all deserve. But in 50% of US states, you could legally be denied housing if you are LGBTQ+. Get the facts and hear real stories at lovehasnolabels.com. Brought to you by Love Has No Labels and the Ad Council.
Are you ready to discover remarkable stories of resilience and cultural connection? This is Diaspora, a show sharing the journeys of first-generation immigrants from the Indian subcontinent now building their lives in North America. Inspiring, insightful, and always engaging, Diaspora offers a unique perspective on the immigrant experience. Join me, Aditya Mehta, my guests, on the Diaspora show every Wednesday at 2 p.m. right here on KKNW.
Find our app in the Apple App Store or Google Play Store and take us with you wherever you go. Alternative Talk AM 1150.
Welcome back to Diaspora on KKNW, where we share interesting stories of first-generation immigrants from South Asia. We're talking to Sanjeev Joshipura, original Mumbaikar and now a Washingtonian, and I mean from Washington, D.C. Before we jump back into the conversation, if you like listening to our show, please consider following us on Instagram or TikTok or leaving us a 5-star review wherever you listen to your podcasts. So Sanjeev, what I've gathered is that a lot of your work happens in India and engaging with Indian leaders. Do you also engage with the Indian government at any level?
We do indeed. We do a lot of our work outside India too, including with Indian diplomats outside India.
Okay.
But yes, we also do our work within India. And yes, the answer is we engage with the Indian government in different capacities. We engage with the Ministry of External Affairs, sometimes with the Finance and Commerce ministries, occasionally at state level governments as well. So yes, we do.
I like to think our current External Affairs Minister is a bit of a rock star. And I feel like somewhere like India as a country's reputation is also getting elevated than what it used to be. I have friends in places where you don't typically see a lot of Indians, like Sweden or Mozambique, and they say that how the local population regards Indians has improved. And I know Prime Minister Modi has always been very excited about the NRI community, and the big thing he did at the Howdy Modi conclave and all that is very recent. But even when he was Chief Minister of Gujarat, he used to have that vibrant Gujarat summit. So what's your opinion on this government's interest in its diaspora, and what does it look to gain from the diaspora? Because remittances are one thing, right? But what else do you think is on the government's priority list for the NRIs?
I think a couple of things here. Just to take a quick step back, the engagement with the diaspora began, I think, more during the Manmohan Singh time, when the view started changing that the diaspora is not, sort of something to be scorned, but rather something to be embraced and built a relationship with a group of people. And that started changing then. But I will say that during the Modi tenure is when there has been a greater emphasis put on building diaspora relations, and definitely even more so in the later parts of his tenure. There's no question about that. So, I think the Indian government, first of all, on remittances, the highest number by far in terms of remittances is from immigrants, Indian immigrants based in the United States back to India. But you're right. I mean, we look well beyond that, or the Indian government, I should say, looks well beyond that to the diaspora. It's also about knowledge and information exchange and being a platform for that. It is also about being a voice, if selectively and on certain matters, and not always, a loud, obvious voice, but certainly extremely strong well-wishers for the US. I think your question is specific to the US, but
Yeah.
you also mentioned other countries, for relations between those countries and India, right?
Yeah.
So I know that there has been a recent bit of a kerfuffle about why is the Indian diaspora in America not speaking up on the tariffs, for example, or not speaking up on immigration, things like that.
Yeah.
So I'll just mention a couple of things. I think it's not true to say that the Indian diaspora is not speaking up.
Yeah.
It may be true to say that the Indian diaspora is not speaking publicly because of the climate that we are in right now.
Yeah.
But having said that, I will also say that there are indeed other issues which are very important to the Indian government. So, for example, the Indian government, in its sort of foreign policy arsenal, in its toolkit, views one of the important parameters as being how the Indian diaspora population in a particular country is treated, right? That influences India's relations with that country, right?
Of course.
So now, at a time when, like I mentioned earlier, the Indian diaspora is facing increased vitriol, I know that the Indian government is looking at that in America and to some extent in other countries as well.
Yeah.
And I can tell you just narrowly, speaking about Indiaspora because I work there, Indiaspora is taking a role in that instance very publicly on X, on Twitter, rebutting the trolling that comes our way, some of which is very nasty and very nonsensical, but rebutting it in a very factual, measured, balanced way and giving examples and facts and figures about how the Indian diaspora is actually helping build America.
Yeah. I mean, just that number you shared about percentage of population versus percentage of taxes, that was quite striking. I didn't even know that. How do you see India having changed in its confidence? India as a country, as a government, as a population, in its confidence on the world stage in the last, let's say, 10, 15 years?
Tremendously. It's been a sea change. It's a day and night. The India I left is not quite the same country as India today. Yeah. And I would say for the majority of things, that change has been for the better. The confidence of the country, the ambitions and aspirations of the country, the people therein are, increasing sort of year by year and decade by decade, increasing quite dramatically. Of course, this is not to say that everything is hunky-dory and it's all a bed of roses. There are, as anybody who follows India knows, there are some significant problems, just as there are in almost every country in the world, really, including in the United States for that matter. So, but having said that, overall, the Indian government, and you were talking earlier about Jaishankar, the Indian foreign minister, I think perhaps the way that he conducts himself and represents India on the world stage and how he portrays India's interests today on the world stage is nothing but a manifestation and a reflection of the rising confidence that the Indian populace and the Indian government feels about India's future prospects.
What areas have you seen the most change in India when you go back? Not geographical, but like what aspects of society have you seen the most change?
Clearly, consumption, the ability to consume disposable income is much higher than it was before.
Yeah.
I'm talking about not just the elite, financial elite, but also talking about the middle classes.
Yeah.
That is much higher than it used to be before. I think given the internet and the AI age and given India's rising startup culture, their exposure to technology and therefore the world outside India is increasing even in tier 3, tier 4 cities and sometimes smaller towns and villages.
Yeah.
Now, there are problems that are associated with development, which occurs in every society in the world. Historically, it always has.
Yeah.
Problems like pollution, problems like traffic. All of those problems are also getting worse.
Yeah.
But, overall, if one were to say, okay, your trade-off will be you'll have worse traffic, but you'll have tremendous economic growth, I think, most countries would take that, but with the strong realization that they cannot ignore traffic and pollution and environment and all of those kinds of things either.
Yeah, no, that's a great answer. I see that the delivery of public services has improved significantly.
Correct.
Passport takes 1 day to come. Like, I remember sitting in a passport office for more than a day, and the passport would come in 1 to 2 months, and you would have to know somebody, you would have to have an agent, and all of those things.
Absolutely.
I also see infrastructure development to be unbelievable. Like, I did not think that Mumbai would have a second airport in my lifetime.
In fact,
And
the airports in India look better than
of
most of
course,
the airports in America.
yeah. And I'm a bit of an aviation buff. So my producer JD here is also one. And the first time we met, our conversation was about how ingeniously the Mumbai airport is developed on such a small amount of land, and it's the world's busiest single runway airport. And so basically what they did there is, you have departures and you have arrivals. And normally these two are stacked on top of each other. Arrivals is usually at the bottom. But here, because it's a massive international airport, you needed to have two departures, one for international, one for domestic. So what they did is they stacked one on top of the other. So it's actually a triple stacked airport. And, the average person won't even notice this. But these kinds of innovations that they're doing in India, so there's a domestic and then there's one more departures on top of it. So it's a very tall airport. Most people don't notice that. And Indians can be extremely creative and innovative when the need arises. But even smaller towns, the aviation infrastructure, the road infrastructure, the trains, the Vande Bharat Expresses, I'm very impressed with what's happening there. Mumbai Metro is, for years it was stalled, and now suddenly everything's coming. And the third thing that I feel is that the depth in every industry has gone up significantly. Like, so for example, when we were growing up, if there was $1 billion company, you would know about it. You would know the name of the company. Today, there are $10 billion companies, which I have no idea. I've never heard the name either. In every industry, you have much more competition. You have a whole depth of players. You have the depth of sophistication of products and consumer choices and all of these things, which I don't think used to exist in India when we were growing up, right?
I agreed very strongly with all of the above.
Yeah, the whole country used to listen to Binaka Geetmala. There was nothing else, right? And now the kind of number of channels, number of shows, number of reality shows and things that are happening in India, it's unbelievable how deep it has spread in every single industry. So
Clearly.
for me, when I go back, those are the things that I get the most amazed by. Now, I live in South Bombay, so that's relatively changing much less than other parts of the city.
Yes.
But even things like the coastal road, things like there's a new mall in front of my house. I don't think I would be able to keep up with that anymore. And my parents and I always talk about this, that, you left India when it was about to take off. And I go back to this high context versus low context cultures. And then I say that because I'm low context, it's harder for me to succeed in India because I'm not built for those set of challenges. But anyone who is built for that set of challenges, that is the place to be in, probably the entire world right now, to grow and make generational wealth and grow businesses. So
yeah. And there might be immigration years from now from the low context countries, as you call them, to high context countries like India. That may yet happen.
Yeah, there is a legion of expats living in China and in Japan. So, when the growth was there, those countries were able to go there. And smaller countries like the UAE, they will always depend on that. But India is not a country which depends on that at all. No. Okay, if someone's moving to the US today, what advice would you give them so that they assimilate faster, get off to a running start faster, and get on their trajectory of being a model minority and a contributing minority person?
I have to be candid with you on this one, Aditya. I would first of all ask them what visa or what immigration status they are coming on.
Yeah.
I would say that if you are coming here today on a student visa or on an H-1B visa, work permit, things are looking difficult.
Yeah.
44% has been the drop in terms of number of Indian students coming to America shows between last year and this year. So things are looking difficult. Now, on the other hand, America continues to be the envy of the world in terms of economic growth, despite all its challenges. And if you are a big investor, if you are here for economic purposes and you already have sort of a potload of money that you can bring with you to invest or start a business or hire people, then I might give you a different answer. I might then perhaps encourage you to seriously look at America. So it really depends is the honest answer. It's not, if you had asked me this question even 3 years ago, I would have given you a much more simple answer, unified answer, saying, America is the land of opportunity for everybody. We are welcoming of immigrants. And if you are thinking about coming here, please do. And, continue working on US-India ties and helping both countries and all of that.
Yeah.
But today, my answer is not the same, to be very candid.
So, I can understand why illegal immigration is contentious and people taking our jobs, all of that messaging is contentious. But most countries would love to have a pool of skilled immigrants that contribute positively to society, have a low crime rate, pay so much tax. Where do you think this H1 situation has become so bad? Like, it seems to be an easy fix to give those people a path to citizenship, because there's countries like Canada where it's hard to get in, but once you get in, you have a path. And then there's places like UAE, which is everyone comes in, but you're never becoming a citizen. But the US is in this weird spot where it's hard to get in and hard to naturalize. So where do you think that gap is, and why this problem is not being addressed with so many skilled and well-to-do people's lives at stake?
Without pretending to be a sociologist, I believe that the root of these problems lies in, economic inequality. When things are going better, by and large, for most people, and when economic prospects look rosy across the board in society, then people don't mind immigrants, sometimes don't notice them, and perhaps sometimes actually welcome them to the extent that they are increasing, GDP and sort of overall economic growth.
Right.
But when it gets perceived, when the overall economic pie gets perceived as a zero-sum game, and secondly, when there is economic stagnation for everybody except the absolute financial elite, that is when I think a lot of these problems start occurring, and you start otherizing people that look different than you.
Yeah. No, that's a great, very, very valid point. I totally agree. Let's move into our weekly segments now, and let's spin the wheel and see what we land on. We are back to our favorite segment called Mango Memories. So most people in our part of the world have a favorite memory of eating mangoes, if not many favorite memories. What is your favorite mango memory?
In Gujarati, we call it keri no ras.
Yeah.
That is mango juice. To this day, I love mango juice, mango ice cream, anything to do with mangoes. Yeah. But I will say that the mangoes that we get here don't quite compare to the mangoes in India.
Nope. There is no comparison. That's one of the true luxuries for me of living in India.
Amazing. Yeah.
So that brings us to the end of today's episode. Thank you for listening to Diaspora. We hope you enjoyed hearing Sanjeev's very interesting story and his great perspectives. Remember to check out our show notes for links and more information about the topics we talked about today. Diaspora is part of the Speaking Current network of shows and podcasts, all of which are dedicated to inspiring listeners to build lives of meaning and connection. You can find the Speaking Current network of shows wherever you get your podcasts. Lastly, if you know someone who has a story that can be shared on our show, please feel free to reach out to us on any of our social media handles, and we'll be back next week with another interesting story from the South Asian diaspora. Until then, take care and stay curious. And Sanjeev, thank you so much for joining us today.
Really enjoyed this conversation. Thanks for having me.